gearing up for some big news, hopefully, in the next coming weeks. The transfer portal officially ends at the end of April. So there's a very small window of opportunity for college football teams to get to that next level where they're wanting to go to be a potential college playoff team, which is what Mario and this team is trying to do this year.
So I know everyone wants to hear about the names that are being pursued. I'm going to hit you up on the names that are leaving first, just to get your take on these guys. Of course, Trevante Citizen was a pretty prime prospect coming out of high school, top 10 running back at number 8, according to 247 Sports, top 10, 11 player in the state, 133 nationally. So a lot of expected of him. Just your thoughts about his future and why it didn't work out in Miami, possibly.
Yeah, first and foremost for Trevante Citizen, when you look at the running back room this time last football season as a Hurricane fan, you felt very confident because you had a lot of guys in that room that have played college football snaps, have had productivity under their belt, whether it was Henry Parrish, Don Chaney, Mark Fletcher, Jay Allen, and of course Trevante Citizen. You had 5 running backs back there by at the end of the season you felt very confident in. Well, now fast forward to now here after spring, and most of those guys have either left the program or are not playing during the spring. You know, you had a Jay Allen and Mark Fletcher, who are your only 2 running backs that I mentioned that are currently on the roster. Both of those guys have not played all spring and are both battling some injuries right now. So there's no telling the timetable on those 2 guys. And then when you talk about the guys that left and Henry Parrish and Don Chaney, those guys have obviously went to Ole Miss and Louisville. And then you bring up Trevante Citizen, who has already been with the program for 2 years. This is now his 3rd year under Miami Hurricanes football staff. And unfortunately, he's a guy, like you mentioned, was very highly rated out of high school. People who know the name of Trevor Etienne, the running back that was once at Florida, now transferred to Georgia, as good as he was in college football, he was the 2nd-rated running back coming out of Louisiana out of high school. The first was Trevante Citizen, to give you an idea of what type of range or talent Citizen did come out after high school. Unfortunately, with some guys, you battle some injuries, and Citizen was just one of those guys that have yet to become fully healthy in a Miami Hurricanes uniform. This is a guy that we haven't really seen much of in a Hurricanes uniform. So to be quite honest with you, it wasn't too much of a low blow as a Hurricane fan. A lot of this was just hopes and wanting to see a young man do well in a Hurricane uniform. But like I mentioned at the beginning of the show, we are in a crucial state of mind in Miami Hurricanes football right now where we need guys that we can't hope to do well. We need guys that are dependent on that can do well. So you're going to see us go very heavy into the running back room, into the transfer portal, along with some other key positions. But I look for at least 1, if not 2 running backs that we go after in the portal because, like I mentioned, your running back room is very thin as far as guys that are dependable as far as from an injury standpoint or productive as far as in a college standpoint.
We'll stay with the running back spot then, Brad. Damian Martinez is going to lower the pads and knock over some safeties and some linebackers. 1,100 yards last year, all Pac-12, 6.1 per carry. And if you thought that was a fluke, anyone, 6.1 per carry the year before. So he's a 6-yard per carry back. Again, first team all Pac-12. Miami's listed among his options at this point with Mississippi State, Kentucky, and Arizona.
Yeah, so you mentioned Damian Martinez, right? And a few things. You talk about the stats, right? This guy was a number 11th in the nation in yards after contact with 744 yards after contact, which is a very impressive stat. He was a top 15 running back rushing last year in the country. Again, another impressive stat. But the one stat that intrigues me the most, Mark, is yards 10 or more. As we know with Miami Hurricane fans, we have been missing that big threat opportunity at running back, whether it's just a speed aspect or just being able to have a running back that could take it the distance, especially breaking off of tackles. We saw what a guy in Mark Fletcher could do. But this guy in Damian Martinez is a very seasoned guy. He's done it at Oregon State. Like you mentioned, he's an all Pac-12 first team. And he's got a few visits lined up. But before we talk about his visits, I want to go over a little bit background with Damian Martinez. This guy is represented by First Round Management, which is right here in Miami. As we know, First Round Management is a representation of a lot of former Miami Hurricane players and local South Florida athletes, along with Damian Martinez. So that's the first thing to note. But then when you talk about his visits that he has coming approaching, starting with today on the 17th, he's supposed to be visiting Arizona today, Mark. Well, last time I checked, as far as recent news, our running backs coach and Coach Merritt is going to be visiting Damian Martinez and their family in Dallas, Texas tonight for an in-home visit, which any school is allowed to be able to do in the contact period of the transfer portal, as long as it is not the head coach. So that goes to tell me, is he taking that visit to Arizona? If he is, it might be tomorrow that he does it. And that already is a good sign for Miami fans, because we already are going to have a staff member in his ear prior to him taking any of these visits that we're talking about. Then when you look at the actual visits, you mentioned Arizona, Mississippi, Tennessee, Kentucky, and Miami. Well, we have 5 schools that we just listed. Well, guess what? We can now knock it down to 4, because he is no longer visiting the University of Tennessee, which was supposed to be April 21st and April 22nd. So now that brings you down to 4 teams. And when you look closely at these dates, Mark, every school is only getting 1 day except for 1 school. The only school that is getting more than 1 day is the University of Miami. And as we know, people that follow recruiting like myself, transfer portal guys is very similar to recruiting on how you plan and strategic your visits, right? And you got to follow the visits. Well, guess what? Guess who has the last visit in this, Mark? The Miami Hurricanes. So I feel very, very confident that the University of Miami is in a very good spot of landing Damian Martinez. I know the transfer portal has only been officially open for a day and a half, and we're expecting some bigger fish, some bigger news. But in the last 36 hours, the biggest name in the transfer portal is Damian Martinez, and the University of Miami seems to be very linked and up top on that recruitment. So I like where we stand with him. And Miami is doing a very good job at prioritizing guys, specifically in the transfer portal, at a particular conference, Mark, and that's the Pac-12. Guess where Damian Martinez is from? He's from the Pac-12. Cam Ward, Pac-12. Francisco Magaoa, Pac-12. Mish Powell, who we just got transferred from Washington, who's doing a lot of good things on the defensive side of the ball, from the Pac-12. So we are starting to look and prioritize some of these transfer portal guys that have a veteran leadership, good quality on and off the football field, and very productive when it comes to playing elite talent week in and week out. So it's another check mark for Damian Martinez, in my opinion, for this University of Miami Hurricane team.
And especially with Ward and Martinez, I think there's got to be an incentive. Obviously, if those 2 schools, Oregon State and Washington State, they're not going to be playing a big time college football schedule this year. So their better players are going to be looking for opportunity to stay relevant on the national map. We got Brad Tejeda here, Canes Insight. Jackson, we appreciate our guy Jackson, who's lined up all the X. And you got the Canes Insight URL right there, and you've got everything on YouTube, and so it's dropped there in the chat for everyone to catch the links to follow Brad all over the place.
Appreciate that, Jackson. Yeah, we just had the spring game this past weekend. It was a very good turnout. A lot of good players ended up doing their thing. But us as Kings Insight, as anyone knows that follows us, we are very intact with not only the University of Miami football team, but we are now the right hand for Canes Connection. If you use CIS as a promo code when you sign up for Canes Connection, you will get 20% off your first month when you sign up to Canes Connection. And as we know, we're talking transfer portal, and one of the biggest keys in college football now when you're wanting to go after these big fish in the sea is you got to make sure your money is right when it comes to NIL standpoint. And that is the best way to help the NIL for the University of Miami is by donating directly to Canes Connection. We had an awesome event right after the spring game. We had Cam Ward in the building. We had Elijah Alston and Reuben Bain, able to hang out with those guys right after the spring game, ask some very good questions, have the fan interaction in the building as well. So it was a very good turnout, and we have that interview on our channel as well if you want to check it out. But we are constantly bringing in current players on the team, and myself and Peter are also interviewing the recruits that we're going after on a daily basis.
Very cool. Brad, just so you're aware, you're frozen. We got your audio perfect. It's clear. So no worries there. Just wanted to let you know that.
No problem. Yeah, I see that on the screen.
I'm going to let you know, Brad, that I'm going to bring up a name that I'm sure you talked about more than maybe any other name about this time. I'm losing track. Would it have been a year ago or 2 years ago? Cormani McLean. Is
Yeah.
there any chance that Miami tries to lure him back?
I'm going to be honest with you, Mark. Me personally, I wouldn't mind Cormani McClain back, but just understanding and knowing the way Mario and the staff operates, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, it's not going to happen, right? Once you kind of turn your back on the University of Miami, I think at that point we're going to go elsewhere. I do think that we are in a position where we need multiple cornerbacks, in my opinion, especially some cover guys. And Cormani does fit that bill, but I do think there will be some other prospects that we will be going after in the portal. One of the names that I will say that you want to keep a lookout for, there's actually two names. So you have Deani Hill, cornerback from Marshall, who recently hit the portal. This is a young man that was once coached by Chevis Jackson, who is the current cornerback coach for Miami, who was once at Marshall. So they already have somewhat familiarity. He's also a somewhat productive guy at Marshall as well. He's also cross paths with Lance Guidry, who is obviously the defensive coordinator with Miami. And he's originally from Gainesville, Florida, right here in my backyard. So that is one name to look out for as the cornerbacks. And then another name is Anthony Johnson Jr. He's a cornerback from Western Kentucky. He's originally from Miami. So again, Miami ties. And he was actually a pretty productive guy over at Western Kentucky. He's another guy that I would watch out for. But I do think they are looking for big fish when it comes to the secondary. They want a playmaker guy that the opposing team on the offensive side of the ball has to account for, other than Kiko Mangnoa. So I am wanting to see if they're probably going to be a little bit more patient when it comes to the cornerback room. But as far as Cormani, I personally don't think that's going to happen. I think it's probably between South Florida and I heard maybe USC as well. So those are the two schools I would look for Cormani McClain. But I will say the only other player that I think most Hurricane fans are familiar with in the transfer portal currently is former USC player Romello Height. As we know, he was once, flirting with Miami back when we had Manny Diaz and prior staff. It was between Miami and Auburn. He kind of trolled the fan base and the staff and ended up committing to Auburn. Didn't do so well. Auburn transferred to USC. Had a somewhat productive year last year at USC, had 4 sacks, which if you look at our defensive line this past year, Mark, he would have ended up being the second leading sack guy on our team. So it's not too bad of a get, in my opinion. He is a guy that has already visited Miami in the past couple of weeks, and he has had a lot of relationships with Miami staff. It seems to be a mutual thing between the two, but I don't think, again, they are ready to jump the gun at the defensive end position as far as getting a commitment from somebody. So I think they're going to play it by ear and kind of wait it out another week or so and see if Romello Height is indeed the guy that they want to bring in as that pass rusher.
So do you see kind of a combination of approach here with Mario Cristobal and staff going after best athlete, best player, and then also trying to match that up, of course, with need and, going after need maybe first and foremost, but if somebody's out there, even if it's a pretty strong position for Miami currently, but that player is just somebody that they can go get, that they'll still go after him?
That's a good question. I think worst case scenario, right? You always want to get the best player on the board, but I think what Miami and this staff, especially Mario, has realized in the last 2 years, especially with the transfer portal, is you have to be very picky on who you bring in, whether from a locker room standpoint, if they match up well, or just from an aspect if they're going to potentially make their mark very quickly on this roster. There are guys that are currently on the football team. I don't want to bring any up specific names, but there are guys currently on the team that us Miami Hurricane fans are hoping hit the transfer portal, who we were once cheering for this time last season that we got from the transfer portal. So you have to make sure that some of these guys that you bring in are going to be instant impact guys. Because like I mentioned at the beginning of the show, Mark, we are in a very particular state of mind at the University of Miami where third year under Mario Cristobal, you have a guy in Cam Ward who is possibly one of the top quarterbacks in college football. You're bringing in a very good wide receiver core and you're bringing in back most of your defense and staff, you got to capitalize on this moment. And they got to make sure every guy that they bring into this building is going to be a instant impact guy. There is no more just bringing bodies in to fill the room. I think we are finally at the point with Mario Cristobal that there's probably about 10 to 15 more bodies on this roster that you could probably get rid of. And after that, you're 100% Mario guys and 100% bought in to where you could see from a physical aspect, from a size standpoint, or from a productive standpoint, why they belong on this football team. We are very close from getting there. It's all about getting the right pieces to the puzzle. I think they are going to be very picky when it comes to most of these guys that they're looking at. The defensive line position is another one to look out for. The defensive tackle position, there's a couple guys that Miami's looking at, whether it's CJ West, defensive tackle from Kent State, Renee Conga, another defensive lineman from Rutgers as well. But then there's also been another defensive tackle of Demonic Williams. This guy was a true freshman All-American in 2022 and an all Big 12 selection in 2023 from TCU. He kind of fits all the check marks of what we're looking for in a three technique lineman for Miami. So that's going to be another one to watch out for. And of course, there's also names that haven't hit the portal that I think a lot of Miami fans are hoping and wondering to see if they do hit. You know, you never know what happens to a guy like Shamar Stewart out of Texas A&M. If he hits the portal, is that a guy that you take a second look at again? So there's always those possible names that were once wanting to be a Hurricane, went elsewhere, and now it's back to the transfer portal. So we'll see what happens.
Brad Tejeda's here breaking down the Canes, day 2 of the transfer portal. You can catch Brad's work and the rest of the crew there at Canes Insight. So, Brad, you were on the field to check out Miami's look at the final of spring practice there, of course, the spring game on Saturday. So put that together with everything else that you know about what's happened over the last 15 practices. What is your biggest takeaway from what Miami's worked on in the last month?
First and foremost, Cam Ward is as advertised, if not better. When you ask guys on the football team, when you ask people that cover the football team, when you ask Mario Cristobal and coaches personally, they'll tell you Cam Ward is more than what we thought he would be, which goes to show you how great Cam Ward could potentially be, not only for this football team, but for college football. That's a good thing, but that's also a bad thing, right? I could honestly say the gap between Cam Ward and your next quarterback is significant. There is a big gap. And as we know with college football, anything could happen. And I think we do have to continue to recruit better at the college football level when it comes to quarterback. We are at a particular moment where as long as Cam Ward stays healthy this year and does what he's supposed to do, I expect us to jump in the portal again and get the best portal quarterback next year. So I'm not worried too much about that. When you talk about the running backs, like I talked about before, most of your veteran running backs are guys that toted the ball last season. You didn't get to see any of those guys anymore because they're either at other programs or they're injured. So from a running standpoint, most of the guys that have gotten the carries all throughout spring are true freshman guys that I don't think we will depend on as much as we are depending on them now, which is a good thing because they're able to get those snaps and experience under their belt now. The wide receiver room is honestly probably one of the best rooms we've had in a while. The wide receiver room and the linebacker room have flipped dramatically ever since Mario and the staff have been put together. So kudos to Mario, KB, and the rest of the staff there. The guys that you're hearing about, Xavier Restrepo, Jacoby George, Isaiah Horton, Ray, JoJo, Nikar, those guys are as advertised. I think we'll probably go in the portal and maybe get one more guy that we could put on the field that the defense will make sure to where they can't double team Xavier Restrepo. If you could get another wide receiver out there to where they can't just eye on Xavier Restrepo every play, that's what you want. The tight end room, is the ceiling is very high, but the productivity is very low currently. So there's a lot of hopes and aspirations for that tight end room. And as long as everyone stays healthy and everything goes how it should in the tight end room, we will be right back to being tight end U, in my opinion. That is one of the best rooms in the country as long as everything goes as it should. Offensive line, you don't really have to talk much about it. You got Mario and Mirabal. Your first 5 guys are pretty pretty cemented in. You got Samson Okinola right now, who's transitioning between left guard and right tackle at times because Francis Mainoa, who is your starting right tackle, has been out all spring. That's just due to precautionary reasons. He should be back for the fall. So you pretty much have a solid 5 right now. It's really that second rotation that they're kind of playing with right now. I would expect maybe one guy out of the transfer portal, maybe a Jason Zandamela, who is an interior guard / center at a USC. He never played at USC. This is a 2024 recruit. It's probably going to be between Miami and Florida if I had to guess, but this is a guy that Mario and staff have always wanted in the last year and a half when it comes from a recruiting standpoint, and now he's in the portal. So he could be a very good depth piece moving forward for us for the next 3 to 4 years. The defensive line, when you look at roster, from top to bottom, as far as from a name standpoint, I don't see many teams in the country that are as loaded as us when you look at productive stats and just the names on paper. But then when you look on the football field in spring, and especially in the spring game, a lot of those guys on paper are not on the football field. A lot of that, again, goes back to precautionary reasons. I wouldn't worry too much about it. Most of these guys, Akeem Mesidor, Ruben Bain, Elijah Austin, a lot of these guys either didn't play in the spring game or fairly little. Again, just precautionary reasons. You saw my guy Cole McConaughey, true freshman out of Alabama. He got the start at defensive end along with Jaden Wayne and Marquise Lightfoot and others. So they're doing a very good job at getting some of these young guys a lot of quality snaps against your starting offensive line. So that way, later on in the season, when you're throwing these guys in there, they're able to adapt, execute, and perform because they have been able to do that in practice against good talent. So that's what you like to see. Linebacker room, again, like I mentioned with the wide receiver room, linebacker room has flipped dramatically. You got 4 to 5 guys that are literally just running around, doing everything that they can for this football team and making all the right decisions. Francisco Mainoa has been out for spring, again, due to precautionary reasons. But between Wesley Basaint, Popo, Marcellus, and Chase Smith, and of course, Bobby Washington, he unfortunately was held out for the spring game. Those guys are doing a phenomenal job at reading the defense from a passing standpoint, running standpoint. And then we even got Cameron Bobby Pruitt, who's a true freshman, again, out of the state of Alabama. He has been putting on a show, whether it's at linebacker, safety. We've been putting him all around the field, and he's been performing great. So I expect someone like Cameron Bobby Pruitt to hopefully be something like Ruben Bain was last year for us. He's been doing a lot of great things. And then the secondary, like I mentioned, I'm looking for 1 or 2 more veteran guys that have a lot of productivity already at a D1 program to hopefully come in and help us for that football team. But all in all, Mark, I think we're setting up for a very hopefully great season. It all starts with August 31st up here in Gainesville against Florida that we're going to be gearing up for, man. But this transfer portal, I tell you what, the rivals, they were trolling us when Henry Parrish hit the portal. They were trolling us when Don Chaney hit the portal. They just trolled us when Trevante Citizen hit the portal. I just want to make sure that these same rivals that are trolling us for these running backs leaving, I want them to give us the same energy when they see a running back enter the University of Miami in the next couple weeks.
Well, Brad, that's not going to happen, but that's one way to call them out. There's been nothing wrong with Mario Cristobal's recruiting resume, and that now spills into the transfer portal. So all those skills, all those abilities, all that effort, everything that he has a skill set for, the recruiting process applies to the transfer portal. And that's why Miami's been so effective on paper. Like you say, some of those guys have come through on the field, others have not, but we shall see. It's only day 2. And we'll see what Miami's got. And of course, Damian Martinez, there are some obvious signs that point in Miami's direction. So we appreciate you running those down, Brad. And again, it's Brad Tejeda, Canes Insight. And one more time, Brad, before we let you go, just let people know about the Canes Connection and the promo code available.
Absolutely. Like I said, canesinsight.com. You can find us on YouTube. We're constantly doing interviews with recruits, current players on the team, and we are now one of the biggest partnerships with Canes Connection. As you guys know, that is the official NIL partner for the University of Miami. You can use CIS as the promo code and sign up for Canes Connection. You will get your first month 20% off. You'll be able to get exclusive interviews with our guy D Money, who will be doing exclusive interviews once a week that you can't get info from on YouTube, on Twitter, wherever you get your info from. This is premier content that you can't get anywhere else. And we have, interviews with Cam Ward, Elijah Austin, Ruben Bain, and others. It's a great forum, great website. We've been around for quite a while, so please make sure you check us out. We're always giving you the daily stuff anytime a Canes fan needs their fix. And, we're trying to be creative, just like our guy Mario Cristobal is on the recruitment trail, man. You got to strike the iron when it's hot, and you got to take advantage of every opportunity when it's in front of you. And that's exactly what we're trying to do, like Mario Cristobal, whether it's, trying to get a bunch of recruits on campus when they're about a few miles away for a rivals camp, or first week of transfer portal, and you're going after guys specifically in the SEC that can't transfer to another SEC school, or you got a rival in Florida State that's looking there in the background with the bars behind them in an orange jumpsuit, because this whole first week of transfer portal, guess what team is not allowed to have any contact with any transfer portal players? The Florida State Seminoles, and that's because of the Aquarius Mims infraction from a couple years ago. So shout out to the rivals.
Good stuff, Brad. Brad, you know that you're welcome here anytime. We appreciate you stopping by and showing up for us.
Absolutely, Mark. I'm sorry that the video stopped, man, but I always bring the energy. Anytime you need me, hit me up, man, and go Canes.